and they could help accelerate some of these projects that we've been waiting for, trying to figure out how to fund for quite some time.
I think it's time for consensus. Vice Mayor, what's your take on that?
I'm good with how it's presented.
Commissioner Carr?
I am not.
Commissioner Donovan?
I'm good with that.
Commissioner Sieber?
I am too. I think Commissioner Carr, this has got to be brought up at a different discussion, you
Yeah.
know, what you're talking about. I understand what you're saying, and I'd want that too, but for this purpose, I'm good with this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I am too. So we have consensus for the sidewalks. And the next is section 32.
Did that include no
We-
bike trails? Am I
yeah.
correct in that? That included no bike trails, right?
Huh?
That included no bike trails, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Section 32, anybody has any questions with that? This is the amendments. Any questions on that? The only question that I have, Mr. Colianis, is what happens if the charter committee members are not available to call them? Then what's the option two?
Basically, the option, the general, our general conversation went along with, once again, we're putting it right back on you guys.
Yeah.
In the previous time, the city attorney recommended to the board.
Yeah.
What we were looking for is that you make those decisions and the city attorney can figure out how it's done. We're not saying to throw the city attorney under the bus here. What we're saying is you people got your charter committee. You listen to them like you're doing tonight. We're beating each other up left and right. So nobody knows it better than we do. And if we all die in the next 5 years before you do another one, I don't think it's gonna happen because we have some young people on the board. The whole principle was, you've heard from me what our intent was all along. Tonight, I've been telling you, this is what our intent was, this is what we thought, this is what we're trying to do. And that's what we wanna hear from you. You ask us what's our intent, and you tell the city attorney, go for it. It just puts the responsibility back on you.
I agree that the other set of commissioners should be the ones to request. I agree with that too. I was just thinking about.
You know how old I am, and you get.
I'm okay with that. Commissioner Donovan,
I'm good with that.
Commissioner Sieber,
Yes.
Vice Mayor,
I'm good.
Commissioner Carr. We're good. Section 33 on page 14. City Hospital. We're just changing the name.
Yeah, we invited the CEO and their in-house legal staff
Yeah.
and shared with them what our thoughts were, and the basic thoughts were what we had in the charter is way out now because they've changed so many times, and this just guarantees us, I hope, Patrick, I had all the confidence in Patrick in the world that what's written here will give us the same rights, and they have to tell us what they do when they do it because it still belongs to us. And they were okay with it. They didn't come back the second time. They had another meeting, but we did get a call and a letter from the their attorney saying, yeah, they agreed it was good.
Okay. Any questions, Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I understand that the intent of the majority of the strike sections are just general housekeeping as it relates to named parties and dates and things like that. However, I think it's important to reiterate more times than not that the facilities are owned by the city. So in all of the lines that were striked out, you kind of lose the grasp that the it's a city-owned hospital. So I would just ask that on the first sentence of the new language, it says the Board of Commissioners this is on page 15. The Board of Commissioners shall require in all leases of the city-owned property now known as Advent Health North Pinellas. I just think that it's important we reiterate that, and I don't see it, mentioned in the new language. I mean, I understood it's understood, but I just think that it doesn't hurt to
I don't have a,
continue to
personally,
let
I don't have a problem with
the
that.
lessees
and
know that it is owned by the city of Tarpon Springs.
I'm the guy here sitting telling you that belongs to us,
That's it.
every bit of it.
You better believe it.
Mr. Trask?
I think that's a great idea, and
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
makes it a little bit clearer.
Commissioner Carr, you okay with that?
With that one,
Commissioner Seaver? Commissioner Donovan? Okay, number
Oh,
14.
I'm sorry. I thought you meant just, Vice Mayor's recommendation.
You have something else to say?
Yeah, I have something else to say. Okay.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. As we all recall, there was a referendum that was voted upon about extending this hospital lease for another, I can't remember off the top of my head, 30 years or whatever it may be, 60 years. And the hospital lease stays where it's at today. There's a lump sum of $3 million that was paid to the city once the referendum was approved. And the discussion on the previous board before Vice Mayor was elected and Commissioner Donovan was elected was that the assumption and the agreement was that when the charter committee would reconvene, it would put some type of language in there about $3 million, was my understanding. So the goal of this is that the $3 million stays in a fund. It grows interest in that fund over the next 10 to 15 years. I can't remember exactly the time certain. And then at that point, if it's 10 or 15 years, the hospital's lease goes from $300,000 a year to $10 a year. I can't remember what it was exactly. And the city would pull from that bucket of money that's supposed to be set aside and not touched to replace that $300,000. And that bucket of money would last for the remainder of the lease with the city of Tarpon Springs. The problem is that we're on our second board already from when that discussion happened. And then if the city manager changes, and that could happen multiple times over the next 15 to 20 years, there's nothing set for that money to be held in reserve during that time certain. So I would make the recommendation based on the discussions that we had as the board. That was my understanding that was the approach that we're going to be taking. I would want to make the recommendation to the board here that we make a recommendation to the charter committee that's looked at being added into the hospital section, similar to how the sidewalk fund is, but then after the time certain is when the city would start drawing on that dollar to replace the $300,000 a year that would go away. That makes sense?
You want to memorialize the agreement in the city charter.
Absolutely.
I don't think that's a bad idea.
I think it's good.
Yeah.
Yeah, we already have the agreement, so it makes it.
We
go
do
ahead
have a
and transfer
signed
over here.
agreement and
Well,
contract, but
Yeah.
that's fine with me.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
And I'm sure the charter commission will go along with that as well.
I personally don't have a problem with that. I didn't know the total details of all that $3 million. Have you heard anything about them hurricane-proof the outside of the building yet?
That's a separate project that they're working on that the city's not paying. But that was one of the reasons why they are investing, though, is that the long-term lease.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with putting it in there. There's 6 others that may, but
It's a lot easier to
please
reference.
include it in what you're gonna send us.
Any other comments on the section 33? To the hospital? No? So we are good with that. What's the next one?
That's it, that's the last one.
That's it. So, Mr. Trask, what's next? You're going to write those things up, and we're going to be reviewed the next meeting, right?
That's correct, and I also want to remind you that you have an opportunity tonight to add any additional changes to the charter that you want to move forward separately from what the Charter Review Commission has requested. So if there is any language in the charter that you would like to add, now is the time to discuss that. And obviously, that would require it coming back to you in ordinance form. It would have to be approved, and then it would move forward, just like the Charter Review Commission's ordinance would move forward.
I don't have any additions, Vice Mayor,
I think we basically did that as we went through it, Mayor.
as we go through. Mr. Stephen?
Donovan? No, I don't have any.
No, I just had a question for our city attorney, just on the process. So, let's say some of the stuff we threw in there tonight, whatever it is, can the Charter Review Committee come back and say, no, we don't wanna do that, and then it's gonna be put on the ballot, and it's gonna vote against, commission versus what the Charter Review Board wanted? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. So every one of these items tonight is in the form of a recommendation to the Charter Review Commission. Please consider this, please make these changes. They decide, no, you guys don't know what you're talking about, we're gonna move forward with the way that we had it proposed. Then obviously, the charter now requires you to adopt it exactly how they provide it to you on the second go-round. And so if you wanted something different, we need to draft an additional ordinance or ordinances that would change the language the way that you wanted it changed.
Gotcha.
And then they would both be on the ballot, and whichever one got more votes, that would be the one that would control.
Okay.
Okay. We going to review all those again on the 22nd, right? Because you're gonna write them up.
Yes, I'm gonna
Which is
write
the
all
next
this up.
meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
And so if you wanted to leave time to maybe the possibility of adding additional language, the problem is that you won't know the position of the Charter Review Commission at
Right.
the next meeting. You'll only have this written in written form, which we're gonna send to them.
Yeah.
So you may wanna set a time, and maybe in November, when it comes back to you, to,
Review it again.
review it one more time.
I didn't ask you, Commissioner Carr, you have any additions?
We appointed the commission, or the committee, and we've shared our recommendations, and I don't think, right now, feel that we should propose any language ourselves as a board to go against anything.
Yeah, I think that was a great meeting, and, again, I'd like to, thank all the members of the Charter Review Committee.
Mr. Mayor,
And
I started out saying that I hope that we can make all this work, so
Yeah.
there's not two
this is
choices for the public to make, and I think we can do that.
to us to be synchronized and have one
Yes.
instead of two. When I was, interviewed by, the commission upstairs, that was one of the things that I suggested, is to make sure that we all have the same, recommendations to the public. And, I also like to thank, the, city clerk, Ms. Jacobs, and Mrs. Manousis for doing, excellent job providing you the information and putting up with you, Mr. Coley.
They did that. They put up with a lot.
He's my friend, so I can tell him that, so,
You didn't tell them about us meeting yesterday, though, did you?
yeah. So Also, I'd like
I'll
to
tell
thank-
on myself, because I know he's gonna say it before it's over with. I had a real bad weekend. I worked too long and got home late yesterday and
Don't tell him, man.
told
Come
Linda
on.
I gotta take a quick shower and get dressed. I got a meeting tonight. Well, it was Monday. She thought it was a charter meeting. So I'm sitting out here in my truck, can't get into City Hall, and I called Chris and said, what the hell's going on here? We got a meeting tonight, don't we? And he said, Jim, you all right? I said, yeah, what's up? He said, it's Tuesday. This is Monday. And I said, oh, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, but you just did. I also like to thank, the city attorney, Mr. Perez, for doing an excellent
Oh,
job,
he
so
did a
thank
great
you
job.
all. Commissioner
Without a
Siebel.
doubt.
I wanted to thank you all too. This is
Yeah.
my second time doing this, and I feel like this committee worked really hard, and made some valuable changes. The last committee, I don't feel did as much work or had as many recommendations. They did a great job, but I feel like this time, there were some great recommendations, and I appreciate it, and I wanna thank all of you for, being a part of
The
it.
best part of that is you guys picked the 7 members, and that's what made the great committee.
Thank you. Commissioner Donovan, you got a comment?
No, thank you all very much for
Okay.
your hard work. I think everything's going really well. Hopefully, we don't have any disputes over any of that, but we'll
Alright.
see. But thank you guys very much for your hard work.
Appreciate it.
Well, that concludes the work session. It's adjourned at 10:02.
Go Rays.
Game.